Absolute Martian Manhunter, issue 1, Dennis Camp and Javier Rodriguez on the art. So I actually saw the news that this was getting extended to 12 issues before I read it.
Okay.
And it seemed like people were being positive, and I was like, oh, that's cool, because it wasn't that I wasn't looking forward to it necessarily, but it kind of looked like the weird one. You know, like between all the absolutes, this was the one that kind of felt like, okay, this is going to be quirky, and it might not be for me, and that's okay, because it's just it's a mini. But ultimately, though, when I read it, I was like, okay, there's a very strong sense of style here, and I also it kept me on my toes, like a lot of these absolute books have at first, where I don't really know what the rules are or what this version of this character is, because like this starts off with like a guy, an FBI agent named John, who's in an explosion, and we get these panels of him being patched up, and there's like a little moment where you see what is in silhouette what the Martian Manhunter looks like in this with this shape with just the one red eye kind of thing, with some of this multicolored kind of like clouds floating around them, and it's just this little tease, right? And I was thinking early on, okay, so this is John Jones, but he's got an alias. He's named John, and he's in the FBI. But then as the issue kept going on, it started becoming clear that no, this is just a human named John who's an FBI agent. But all of a sudden, he's hearing things telepathically, and I was like, wait, does someone become Martian Manhunter in this world? By the end of the issue, though, the impression I was getting is that John Jones, the Martian Manhunter, is more like an entity that attaches to a human in the absolute universe. It feels like he's bonding with this human, and that's why this human is now suddenly like hearing random things from his doctor or his wife. Like he's hearing their thoughts, and he's not really sure why he's hearing them or even noticing sometimes that they are. But it kind of presents itself as a slow possession story where he's seeing these multicolored like clouds or smoke come in, and he's seeing it more and more until by the end of the issue he's kind of going down like a rabbit hole of like almost like LSD dementia, and it kind of like finally like the Martian's able to speak to him and say, hey, it's me. I like I am you, you are me, we have so I'm just getting that from what this book has told me, and it's my interpretation of it, that John Jones isn't physical in this world. He just attaches himself to a physical person.
Yeah, I have no idea what happened in this book, but I love it. like again, had it very clear. We understood what Absolute Batman was. Then we understood what Absolute Wonder Woman was. This could be just a different take on Martian Manhunter. It doesn't necessarily need to be absolute, right? So I'm curious to see how it fits in to that.
But come on, though, if we ever get Absolute Justice League in this version of Martian Manhunters, like that's an interesting proposition.
And it feels like it's really leaning into that concept of Martian vision, right? Where we always see Martian Manhunter, like, well, we'll talk about it when we get Justice League Unlimited, right? Where he has kind of similar powers to Superman plus telepathy and shape changing, right? And there's always this concept of Martian vision, and what does that exactly mean? Was it just like this heat vision? Does he just read your thoughts? Here, it really leans into like the psychedelic. It like these are what the thought forms are. Like through this Martian vision, he can see what not just see, but hear and feel what the people are going through in order to figure things out, which I think is a really fun concept.
I think what's interesting to me about this is that it seems like he was bonded with John Jones at the time of this explosion. And I think that's interesting. And also this idea that he keeps seeing the Martian vision represented in this very kind of multicolored smoke that he's seeing move around. And I say, and this idea of where there's smoke, there's fire comes up a lot, like that phrase. Yeah. And of course, Martian Manhunter's weakness is fire. So I don't think it's an accident that a lot of this is all revolving around the idea of fire and smoke. So, like, that's interesting. And it makes me, because the part of it's also that he, like, the FBI guy, despite the fact that he should be taking time off from work, he lies to his wife and says that he has to work. And he lies to his like employers and says, no, I need to work. Like I should be, I don't need to go home. I don't need to spend time with my family. So he's kind of obsessed. He wants to explore why this happened, why this bomber set off this like coffee shop or whatever it was. And he's looking into it. And when he talks to like the the mom of like the guy who did this with the suicide vest, like the mom's adamant, no, he was a good boy, he wouldn't do this. And it makes me wonder, was he like being like manipulated by like telepathic stuff? You know, whether or not it was Jean inadvertently caused it and he didn't mean to, or is there a white Martian doing something?
Yeah.
Is the white Martian also something that attaches itself to people, like Jean seems to be? Because it's during all this like detective-y stuff where he's talking to like the you know, the suspect's mom, the neighbor, whoever, and like he, you know, the character's narrating and saying like, how do I know like what this guy's thinking right now? How do I know that this neighbor's telling the truth but hiding the fact that she smokes a lot of drugs? Or how do, like, he keeps like sort of noticing things, and he's having like these weird moments where he looks down at his wife chopping up some vegetables when he gets home, and it turns into just this weird psychedelic like mix of colors on the chopping board, and he doesn't, and it's like, you know, and there's even a weird moment actually where he goes to speak to his son, and his son's like made little like Play-Doh versions of his mum and himself, and he's like, oh, where's your dad? Where am I? And he points over to like a little Play-Doh of like what I assume Jean's going to look like, you know, the Martian Manhunter. So I like, it's just all these things. It really plays this idea of him being obsessed, and just like this thing that's sort of getting into his brain and really. I don't even know how to describe it. Like at a certain point.
No, it's this kind of thing of obsession where now he's obsessed with this. But I wonder if he got fused with whatever this version of John Jones is, whatever the Martian Manhunter is, in that bombing. And now, and instead of like, you kind of said like an entity kind of vibe, I'm just wondering if this is how how a human brain could what's the word I'm looking for? How it interprets the Martians of the absolute universe, right? It's almost like these thought forms, and now this thought form is now bound to this one person. Yeah. And it's going to have to be almost like this coexistence where John Jones is the person, but the Martian Manhunter is going to be the, you know, when he uses the powers to do
I do genuinely wonder if Martian Manhunter is here to manhunt someone, like if that's directly what he's here for. And then because it gets more sort of like kind of clear to some extent that these colors represent the Martian stuff, because when he's talking to the suspect's mom again, he basically sees this color smoke coming out of her ears, almost like the thoughts are draining out of her. And then that's where it goes kind of really wacky, where he starts just sort of seeing it all around him, and he starts seeing like the memories she has of her son, and it's all represented in this multicolor psychedelic kind of, you know, wavy art where it's just kind of vaguely forming the shapes inside all the clouds, and he's like coughing up and he's freaking out and all the rest of it. So yeah, and he walks down the street and he can basically see like each person's like covered in a different color, and it all just becomes color vomit, but it works in the context of like he's starting to freak out and just see everything around him and just like hear all their thoughts. Like you sort of see letters coming out of the colors at one point where it says like coffee beans or bacon, and it's like, wait, is this just them thinking about what they're having for lunch or something?
Yeah, he's fish sticks and someone speaking or thinking in Spanish. Yeah, you know, but also just like you're getting these like thought bubbles in different font, right? That is, I'm assuming, the Martian side of this, where it says like, you know, dancing tapestry of multicolored scarves, where it's almost trying to help him perceive this, right? Like it's not just smoke, it's everything, it's how everybody is connected.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it kind of does flash back to that moment of the explosion, which really kind of emphasizes this idea that whatever's happened here, this union that's happened between him and the Martian, has happened in that moment. So no, it's very, very interesting. In fact, at one point he even kind of says something about a memory doesn't really have, like it's not his own or something. It's almost like he's remembering someone else's memory. But yeah, at the end, it's the Martian's actual like sort of talking to him and saying, no, it's not a miracle, it's me. So it's almost suggesting that he kind of saved the because they start
him.
when he's in the hospital. They're like, oh, you're lucky you survived. Like everyone else died. So I wonder if it's just a case of Jean could, or the Martian could only save one person, and or maybe there was a reason why he picked this guy. But either way, there's a lot to unpack and like discover as we go through. And it seems like at the very last panel of that page, it's like he's standing right in front of him. And I actually thought this was the end of the issue because there was the text at the bottom when I was first reading it. Yeah. And then it's like, oh no, there's a whole like couple other pages where he's actually like there. And we get this kind of like reflective moment in like Jean's face or the Martian's face.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at this in physical to see how this effect works, because you can't really hold it up to light on your device. Yeah. You know, but from what I gather, it's like a negative space kind of deal, right? Where John Jones is all in white with this yellow background, and he's very much, you know, there's not a lot of details on his face. And then the Martian aspect is basically every other color, right? So I wonder if you hold it up to the light, it just blends into one. And that's, you know, and then it says backwards, it says where the Martian mind, and then there's a blank. I'm assuming it's supposed to be the F word.
Yeah,
right?
it's MindF. Yeah.
Yeah. So
we're the Martian MindF. Yes, which is a hell of a thing to say right? At the end of this. So it's very much this idea that like we are this now, where it's not just one person is the Martian Manhunter. We are. Yeah.
It's kind of like Firestorm almost, right?
But this is also assuming that, because we're still just kind of assuming a couple of things. We're assuming that he is from Mars, for one. I mean, he says Martian, so I suppose he would be. But like, we're still assuming that he is still Martian Manhunter in the way we think of him as. It may not be. Like, what if this is like a... I don't know. Like I feel like they could literally like go anywhere with this and say, oh, he's actually an experiment from a laboratory somewhere. And he's only called
and
this.
He thinks he's a Martian.
Yeah.
Right?
Or anything. Like, and I'm not saying that I expect that. I do still think he'll at least be from Mars. But I just, there's a lot of places to go here. It's a very focused story, though, that really all comes down to this idea of this regular person has got something in his head that's sort of like giving him these telepath abilities. And by the end, we realize that he has been fused in some way with what we think of as John Jones, if he even has that name.
Right.
And I don't know. But it was a compelling story. Like I was into it. I was super into like him discovering what he was and like the mystery of it. And because like this is such a different version of Martian Manhunter, it's not even like I came into this with the answers. Like I was still kind of like we're still having to kind of think about it and be like, okay, this must be what the Martians are like here. Like in this obsolete universe, they're completely telepathic. They're as in they don't really have a physical form, or maybe if they do, maybe it's the physical forms elsewhere. But he's just existing with them telepathically right now.
Well, that's why I use like a thought form. Like he exists in the ether between, you know, people or whatever, and that's where, you know, that's why he can read the minds and the history and everything, because it's the connection that's there between the people. It's all very ethereal, you know. And again, I'm not as schooled in David Lynch as like you are, but I was getting some very kind of Lynchian vibes here, like when he would talk about transcendental meditation, you know, not so much as the movies or the TV shows, but David Lynch, the person, you know, how everything's connected. You just have to know what to look for, you know, and we're all creatures that are sharing the same space kind of vibe, you know, even thought space. And I was just getting all those vibes from this. And there were a couple times where I was like, man, I don't know about this. This is a little bit too weird. And then like the art would take over and I'm like, at least, you know, I don't know what's going on, but the art is beautiful. Like I love all the colors, because I think this is the same artist that did the Zatanna book with Tamaki. They're bringing down the house.
Was it? I may have been actually, yeah. It might have been.
Yeah.
Sounds right.
Because the art is very similar with the colors.
I'm only questioning it because when that book was coming out, we had two different Javiers on two different books in the same week, and it kept being very confusing. So I'm only just doubting it because of that reason.
Yeah. But I'm going to say that it is because the art style is very similar. What he does with the colors, like there's this one page in particular where he's going back through the bombing, right? And it almost looks like one of those old, who was the graphic designer in the 60s that did like the Vertigo poster Um, and he did, was it Saul Bass? I want to say he did the title cards and for everything. It's very much like that, where he's in red and you follow him across, but he's not colored exactly. It's almost just like the shape around him is all colored. So you follow the red, and then it goes into between the eyes, and there's just like these sheets of color cutting throughout. Like everything's very dynamic and sharp, and it has its own style. And it's, again, every time the story, I was like, man, this is really out there. I'd get to a page like this, I'm like, it's out here in a good way.
Yeah, no, it feels like it knows what it's doing. It doesn't feel like just weird for the sake of weird. It feels like by the end, I had a clear understanding of the type of story that we're telling. There's still things to like answer about how this Martian works, but I like it gave us a solid foundation by the end. As long as you're keep paying attention to it and taking it in, I think it makes some amount of sense. So yeah, all right. What are you giving Absolute Martian Manhunter?
I'm gonna give this a straight 8.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of somewhere in that, maybe even an 8.5. I could be swayed. I think I am. I think I'm going to go 8.5. Really good stuff. Really different type of story that feels very different to like what Martian Manhunter usually is, but in a weird way kind of takes an element of Martian Manhunter and like says, okay, let's take it to the extreme end of this one idea of him, which is the telepathic side of things. And it's basically allowing them to just do this really like unique story that feels so different. Like it feels like an indie book. It doesn't feel like a DC book, really.
No.
But in a good way. And it's almost exciting, the idea that this version will somehow coexist with like absolute Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman when we get down the line.